Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of the Art and Business of Writing podcast. I'm Chris Jones with Kayla Thomas. Kayla, how is it going today?
Oh, it is going good. We're done with Nano and the holidays are creeping up on us.
I know, can you believe it's December already?
Oh my gosh. No, not at all. I'm seriously going, what happened to 2017? I swear we just started it and now we're counting down to the end of it.
I know, unbelievable, man. We're down to these last few days, and then people are probably thinking about their goals for next year, their writing goals, and pretty soon we'll have our own writing goals show to share with everybody, which is always an exciting time. And we'll get a chance to go over the goals that you and I had set for the year and revisit those and talk about lessons learned and where we'll go with those. So I'm glad that we're into that section of the year now, though.
Me too. It's exciting.
So now that we're headed there, we've got another great guest coming up on board today, someone that you know, right?
Yes. We have Julie C. Gilbert, who I met in the Lay Crime Kindle world. She's another Lay Crime Kindle world author. And as we'll talk about in her blurb here, that she is a very talented book description writer. And she's helped me with my last 2 books, I think it is. And she makes they're fabulous. They would be just crap without her. So I'm so blessed to have found Julie.
Yeah, I think that's such a big, important part of writers who are looking to get their books on Amazon and done correctly is just having that book blurb done right, done well, so that it's keyworded and everything is searchable in Amazon. That way, as an author, you don't get lost.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing is like that fear of getting lost in the shuffle, but having someone who understands how to write a blurb that's enticing to get people want to open and read your book or download your book is everything.
It's huge. And it's something a lot of authors struggle with. I know personally for me, I'm too close to my story to boil it down to 2 or 3 paragraphs that, can give somebody enough intrigue to want to open the book.
Oh, yeah. So this is Julie's bio, guys. Julie is a multi-genre author and a high school chemistry teacher. No, not like Walter White, in case you were wondering. Julie is diverse. She's the author of everything from middle grade fantasy to Christian mystery to fast-paced mystery thrillers to nonfiction. She's also a master at writing Amazon book blurbs to help turn browsers into buyers. If you've ever tried your hand at writing one of these, you know how hard they are to write, especially if you have no understanding of keywording. Julie's going to show you the way on today's episode. So get your favorite note-taking device out. Without further ado, this is Julie.
Hey, Julie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, we are so excited to have you here. Before we dive into the main discussion we're going to mostly focus on writing book descriptions because that's something a lot of authors have trouble with. But before we get too far down that road, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up being an author?
Sure. I think the beginning of me becoming an author was high school English, where they made me read all sorts of boringness and they made me pick apart these stories and everything had this meaning. I was like, well, what if it's just supposed to be fun? So then when I had some time over the summer, I just sat down and tried to write something. It was terrible and I buried it. And it may never see the light of day, but it was so much fun that I decided to try it again and again and again. So then throughout college, I just picked a new project every summer. That was the start of it.
Wow, I can totally relate to the pick it apart and find meanings. I often had the same thought of, what if it's just a cool story that we were made to enjoy?
No, so tell us about any recent releases that you're particularly excited about.
Well, I've been on a nonfiction kick as of late. So besides the 5-step blurb book, which came out in the summer, I just put out a 5 Steps to Surviving Chemistry book and a 5 Steps to Surviving Teaching book. So both of those are my latest releases, but I'm actually probably even more excited for the fantasy releases which are coming up. Those are Spirit's Bane, which is coming out November 7th, and The Holy War, which is coming out October 3rd. Both of those are exciting because I get to run cool things like giveaways for Kindles and giveaways for paperback copies. You know, people get much more excited about fiction releases than they do a nonfiction release.
It seems like there's a lot more fun stuff surrounding fiction releases than nonfiction releases. Am I right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, who wants a postcard of a "here's how you survive chemistry" book? You know, just right in your face, like, ugh. No one wants to be reminded of that at all, ever. But with fantasy, you get this cool book with, like, you know, angels on the cover, or you know, whatever fantasy.
Yeah. And you just mentioned giveaways. Do you have one going right now?
Yeah, actually, this second I have one for paperbacks going on, but soon I'm opening up one for a Kindle Fire and some paperback copies, and also because King Sumo doesn't really work so hot with like multiple different prizes, like lesser prizes too. I have a website link to that, which will just allow me to give away other paperback copies of the books that are coming and books that I just have in my backlog.
Okay, cool. We'll make sure that we get that link into our show notes so people can go check it out.
All right, thank you.
Of course. I guess it's time to dive into writing book descriptions, and I'm going to lay a little disclaimer out there that Julie has, as of this summer, come on board on my team and has been helping me with my book blurbs, which I totally stink at writing. I read her book, 5 Steps to a Better Blurb Writing, right? Did I say that right?
Better Blurbs, yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. And it's super helpful. You break it down into these wonderful, easily to digest chunks. And so it's really follow. It's a great book. You guys need to get out on Amazon and pick it up. But she also has blurb writing services, which we can talk about in a little bit. And I highly recommend them because you're amazing to work with, Julie. I'm just going to make you blush a little bit.
Well, thank you.
So, when did you discover you had a knack for writing book descriptions?
That goes back to actually Lay Crime. First time around when we were jumping into the launch there, I came on really late because I was just in contact with Toby over some random questions I had asked her, and then she said, "Oh, by the way, I'm launching this in a month," and I'm like, "Okay, cool, that sounds like fun. I'm in." So I wrote the story and jumped right in, but you know, it was kind of frantic there at the beginning, so we were all helping each other out with proofreading, and we just weren't really sure what was going to happen, so everybody put up their blurbs, and I just started messing with them. And I guess pretty quickly found out that I really liked doing that, just picking them apart and breaking them down and seeing what worked for me, what didn't, and then I just throw back a suggested rewrite, and oftentimes the author would like it, so that was pretty good feedback that whatever was happening was working.
Right? Well, it's a true gift.
Well, thank you.
So having a good book description is really essential to getting readers to buy your product. So what does a good blurb look like, and why is it so important in hooking a reader?
Okay, so for the basic steps, I broke it down into probably a dozen things, and then I kind of wheedled that down even more and figured out that what I like to see in a blurb is a tagline, an introduction, some elaboration, some complication, what stakes are there, because mostly I deal with the fantasy or which is like the world is ending, yeah, that's pretty high stakes, or mystery, like what's in danger or what's being threatened. And then the fifth one would just be kind of wrap it up, bring it back, and leave them hanging just slightly, so that they want to go out and buy it. You know, you don't want to tell them the whole story within that blurb, or they have no incentive to go ahead and pick up that book.
So, do you want to break down your process for us a little bit? I mean, you don't have to get everything there because we want people to go read your book, but can you give us an idea, a little skeleton of an idea of how you go about writing a blurb?
Sure. Well, mostly what I do with other people's blurbs is I rewrite them. So I see what they have, see what the essence, read their notes, and then I usually generate 3 or 4 taglines that I think would sort of work and kind of shape the blurb around that. Because your tagline is super important. A lot of people have no tagline at all, or they have taglines that are too long, or they tell too much. Introductions you want to know who the main character is, but also, an aside, with fantasy writers especially, there's a tendency to throw in so much more than is actually necessary. They throw in the names of, side characters, and it just gets muddled. And because, especially with fantasy, you're not even sure oftentimes, like, what's the planet name, what's the random creature's names, what's the main character's names, because they're all sort of weird. But then you also need to get to the point of the story. So it's, in essence, you're telling the story in about 85 words or so, which gets complicated. People struggle enough with writing synopsis, which is taking that 80,000 word novel and boiling it down to, 1,000 words or something like that. And then to take that and have to bully it down even further into such a fine process it's tough for a lot of people. But I think if you follow the 5 steps rather, that basic outline, you can get a feel for what your story is and what you really want to leave readers with.
So if somebody's sitting down and just about to, they're like, okay, I got to write this book blurb, what would be the first step in getting started?
I would say start with, if you really want to get down to it, start with your synopsis. Kind of take your synopsis and throw that down on your Word doc, and then just start highlighting and editing the heck out of it. Just cut down what do I need and what don't I need. And once you have that, that ugly version of the blurb, then you can keep reading it over and refine it, because it's so much easier to cut things down than to generate up from scratch. Or you can go the other way if you so desire. When I write my own blurbs, I usually end up with the same mistakes that I tell people not to do. But, because it's always harder to write your own stuff, obviously. But
of course,
you throw down what you think. I think I naturally follow the 5 steps anyway. I always start with a tagline. Always, you end up throwing down too much. You make 2 or 3 big paragraphs and then cut down again. I don't always start with like the giant synopsis, but usually I try to write the blurb right after I've read the story, so that whatever's happened is fresh in my head. And then I try to write 3 or 4 paragraphs and then get my tagline from there, like, what is this story at its heart? And then, from there, you just try to rewrite it in less and less words. It's a pretty interesting game for a writer. How can I say the same thing in less words? Now I have 50 words. Now I have 20 words. But most blurbs end up being 50 to 150 words.
That's a lot of cutting.
Yeah.
It's almost like a crazy game of composing tweets out of books,
Yes.
Where you've got to basically cut down, like you said, the 80 or 100,000 word book into a 140 word main idea, or 150 word main idea that's still going to be attractive to a reader to entice them to come read the book. That's quite a challenge.
Yes, I think one of the main points that people need to get is that you love your story, but you need to only tell the reader one aspect of the story or 2 aspects of the story. If you're writing a romance novel, you do want to introduce both characters, but you don't have to dive into everything about them. We don't need their entire history right here in the blurb. We need to know, who are they, what do they do, why are they falling in love, and who are they falling in love with. That's the essence of what we need. We don't need, their favorite food unless that's relevant to how they met this person.
Now, oftentimes, writers, authors, pour our souls into our books. We give our all to make sure that it's written well, that it's edited, it's proofread, everything is picture perfect. But then we get to this point with the blurbs, and like you were saying, having to whittle down all of that into a small kind of snapshot. Why is it important, that for authors to really treat their blurbs with the same amount of care and concern that they do with their manuscript, in order to be able to use these blurbs to sell their books?
Well, because this is your front door. This is your welcome mat. this is the first impression that people get. They say that you make a judgment call on people you meet in like the first 30 seconds. Well, the same is true for your book. You're introducing your book to the world, and you have, well, my attention span is markedly less than a lot of people. So I give like 20 seconds, and if I see a giant paragraph in my face, I'm usually just like tuned out. So you want to break it up for them and make it attractive.
So how important is keywording to a good blurb? Like, do you have to, because you're putting it on Amazon where people are searching for books? Because, I mean, Amazon's like the second or third largest search engine. Like, how important is it to keywords your blurb, or is it?
I think that's naturally going to happen. I think it's vastly important. I don't particularly pay attention to it because I'm actually terrible at keywords. But I think if you're honing in on the heart of what your story is, you're going to naturally come across with a lot of the keywords that you know and love with your story. Your manuscript will flow right into your blurb because your blurb is the product description. It is basically the heart of what your story is. So if your story has a lot of keyword richness going on, then so will your blurb.
So is it a mistake to use the same blurb in both places, on your paperback and on Amazon?
I've done both, and mostly because it's harder to change the one on certain things like the Audible description. Audible's paying to get anything changed on, so the descriptions there are probably different than the ones I put on Amazon because I have full control over that. But I think it's one of those situations that you got to go with what works for your book. Certain ones, on the actual paperback, it's nice to have a longer description. Like, for example, Heartfelt Cases, I have 3 stories in there. So that paperback, the blurb is giant, but it's basically mini blurbs for all 3 of the novels. And I think that works there. Whereas on Amazon, when I was redoing them, I chose to do something, just a little bit shorter than that, kind of streamline the process. So, and I think, if somebody picks this book up in a Barnes & Noble or some other brick and mortar store, and they're actually seeing the back, I think they like having the longer description. So, but I'm not necessarily certain that it's a mistake per se, or if it's just there's a difference in the mediums, and it's sometimes better to market yourself as this is going to be the short and sweet version that you throw in people's faces on Amazon, and not necessarily so on a paperback.
Okay, that makes sense. I know that as someone who struggles with writing descriptions and blurbs, that for me it's like, oh my goodness, I'm done. I've got something, so I tend to just put it on both of them. So I'm so glad to have at least something.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see where that would be a tempting thing to do as an author. I definitely do it too.
So you mentioned a little earlier about whittling things down, how people tend to want to put in extra side characters and all the details about their characters in the world right there in that succinct little blurb area. Can you just get really clear about, what should you absolutely avoid? Sometimes people want hard and fast rules, so they could kind of look at a checklist and go, oh, yeah, I really shouldn't have put that in there, or, ooh, that really has to go in there.
You need your main character, and you need the main story arc. In certain genres, like romance, I would argue that there's probably 2 main characters that you need to focus on. And then with mysteries and thrillers, sometimes there are 2 if you want to focus a little bit on the villain as well. But you need, just at the basics, you need the main character and you need the main problem. You don't need the whole plot. You need to know what major issue or problem is this character facing. Because if you can convey both of those points, this is who they are and this is why you should love them, are they a down-to-earth person? Are they a struggling single mother? Are they, just a kid who's ordinary and in school and being bullied for X, Y, and Z? Why should we care about this character? And then that can tie right into what are they facing and what are the stakes involved? Is this stake going to be the world's going to end? Or is the stake going to be, the family's going to fall apart, or the kid's not going to get the inheritance, or whatever it may be? We need to know who they are, what they face, and just a hint about what they're going to do about it.
Interesting. Now, let me ask you a quick question about verbiage, like words that you use in there. Like, how is it important to use very action-oriented words? Like, like when you typically write things that you're trying to entice people in, whether it's a resume or some sort of bio sketch, you always want to use action-oriented words. Is it the same for a book blurb? As saying like, the main, John Johnson is a kid from the streets, or usually say, John Johnson, roamed the streets. Like, is it important to use very action-oriented words?
I think action-oriented words are always preferable because they make you think more than, passive words. They just kind of lull you in and they take up word space. Whereas an action word can accomplish so much more in way less space. So in a blurb where you are arguing with the word counter over what you're allowed to keep in, action-oriented words are always preferable.
Cool. Now, once you realize the value of writing kind of these top flight book blurbs, how has it helped with your own book sales? Have you seen a spike, or have you seen growth in your own book sales now that you've kind of learned the formula to write good book blurbs?
That's a complicated question because I've been doing more stuff with emails, and I think that may have more to do with it than. But it's a chicken and egg thing. Are the blurbs better so I'm getting better visibility, or am I getting better visibility because of the emails, which is in turn letting more people see my blurbs, and that's leading to sales? I don't know. There has been an uptick, but I'm not exactly sure because it's a terrible experiment. There is no control, and there's not just one independent variable. There's quite a few independent variables here. So, my chem students would be telling you, terrible experiment. You can't do it. So I can't really tell what's causing an uptick.
I love it, using words like independent variable. You've spoken like a true scientist and a science teacher. Love it.
Yeah, well, that's me right now.
Now, besides yourself, and the work that you've done for yourself, who are some authors that you've come across or that you've worked with that that you think have really cool book blurbs that our audience can hop on Amazon and just see examples of?
Toby Neal's are pretty good. I've messed with some of hers anyway, just for the practice. But something must have been working right for her anyway, because has over time built up a very large following. So in seeing what she has now, she actually has really long taglines. But that was something she had established early and just kind of kept as a pattern for the rest of the Lay Crime series. So, in the first one, it must have worked right because people learned to love those books. Other people, as far as indie books are concerned, I've worked with a couple people with pretty good voice. Kayla's are pretty good. Amy Shojai's are pretty good. Eden Bailey, that was the other one I was thinking of. Eden Bailey does pretty good blurbs to start with.
So, if somebody is listening to this and going, oh, this is all well and good, but I would rather farm this out to a professional, what does one look for? You have your services, of course, but if somebody's looking to hire someone, what would they look for in a blurb writer?
Well, I guess it comes down to working with anybody. You need to be able to work with the person. There are some people I've worked with who, totally hated what I gave them. And that's cool. You got to learn what's going to work for you and what's not going to work with The people actually I found that didn't like what I was giving were the ones with actually the most voice to them. On an aside here, mostly I recommend going with third person point of view and perspective and keeping it very present, active. But there are some people who really like to, in the first person narrative, do the blurb from a first person narrative. And while I don't typically do that, I can see how some people really want to get in the voice of their character. There's a danger in that they're going to. I find most of those voices annoying. So, but that could be good and bad. I mean, if that's the voice of the rest of the book, then it's good to have it out in front that people learn very quickly whether they like that voice or not. I'm sorry, what was your original question? I went on a tangent.
No, that's okay. That was really good information, actually, that we hadn't talked about before. So if somebody's looking to hire a person to help them write their blurbs, what kind of qualities should they look for? And I think one of the things you mentioned is being able to work with the person. What do you think about going back and forth and working together for it? Or should somebody be looking for something where the person they hired is just going to write it all out and then they just slap it on their book?
Well, mostly what I end up doing is rewriting. So, I mean, I like going in with what are your thoughts right now as an author? What are you trying to set down? And then working with a paragraph or two of their notes and what do they really want in this? Because, I mean, there was one blurb that I was working with and it was totally giving me like a YA funny vibe. And then he tells me that this is supposed to be a really dark fantasy kind of thing, like very serious. And I was like, oh, that is not coming through. So we have to work a little bit with the wording here. So, it's always interesting to be able to work with somebody, see what their original vision is and then try to match it. As far as what you were asking about people looking for, what do you look for in a blurb writer? I would look for examples, because a lot of people who offer such services have exemplars of here's the before, here's the after. That would be a great place to start because you can see, okay, what could they potentially be doing with mine? And then just open a conversation, see if they're open to working with you.
Very cool. And for the do-it-yourselfer, you have a book, right?
I do. It's called 5 Steps to Better Blurbs. So this book just helps people take wherever they are with their blurb writing skills and tries to take them to the next level. Although even for me personally, one of the pieces of advice in there is get outside opinions. Whether that's free opinions and go on Facebook, find a good supportive group and just, slap it up there and say, hey, I need help with this. Where you get a lot of people weighing in. Or they could, shameless plug, they could join my Facebook group and they could, I think it's called Julie C. Gilbert's Book Blurb Club or something like that. And then I occasionally offer free rewrites. But even the people there, and they're all willing to learn and they're all willing to pitch in, so you get lots of opinions there as well.
This is a great conversation today. I learned a lot. I've been, kind of taking some notes, but I've learned a lot about just the process of writing book blurbs, the steps that you go about, just the things you need to say, the things you shouldn't say. I mean, you really came and brought a lot of really cool gems today, Julie. Any parting wisdom that you want to leave with our audience today?
Going back to the idea of writing and always improving, that's the heart of it. You have to love what you do and do what you love. So, when it comes to blurb writing, you love your book already, and you have to take it and form something new. They're their own beast. But I guess a parting word of wisdom would be don't be afraid to try new things with blurb writing. Write it a couple different ways. See what's working for you. What do you personally like, and what do you think is telling your author style the best?
So, Julie, how can our listeners reach you?
Well, they can reach me on Facebook. Mostly if you just type in my name, I think it should come up. But you need the all-important C in there, or else you get other random people named Julie too. And they can find me on Twitter. That one, I will just put a caveat here. I did not make up this Twitter handle because this was back in the day before Amazon made self-publishing easy. And I had a company that did some stuff. So my Twitter account is at author Gilbert. And my Instagram account, which I did come up with, is my name, Julie C. Gilbert, and it's got an underscore and it says writer. So those are, but, mostly I just tell people my email is devioschildren@gmail.com because I'm one of those people who really obsessively check my email, or Julie C. Gilbert 5 steps @gmail.com. Any of those will reach me somehow.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming, and we'll make sure that we get all that information in the show notes so people can get a hold of you with their questions and learn from you. And this has been a great episode. Thanks again.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, author, Chris here. I want to tell you about a program that I'm really excited about called Group Gold. For a long time, I would post on my Facebook fan page only to find crickets. Very few interactions, very few connections. That is before I discovered Facebook groups through the program Group Gold. Facebook Group Gold program is the most complete one of its kind to help you grow, engage, and monetize your Facebook group. Mark Mawhinney, the program creator, will walk you through every aspect of how to create, manage, and run your Facebook group so that your tribe is coming to you. Makes it easier, doesn't it? When you've got people interacting with you because they want to be there. That's the beauty of Facebook groups over Facebook fan pages. Ever since I started the Facebook Group Gold program, I've been growing my group, building my audience, and I've got people in there who are active and who want to be there, hanging out with me every single day. You can have that too. Just visit my website, www.readywritelaunch.com, and under the Offer tab, select Group Gold. Then you can see for yourself the magic of Facebook groups.